Cassie Moore stood by her mother's grave, tears in her eyes, heart heavy with grief. The sky was grey, and the air was still, filled only with quiet sobs and the sound of dirt falling onto the coffin. She was trying to say goodbye to the woman who raised her, the person she loved most in the world. Then she saw a car pull up late. It was Derek, her fiancé. Cassie felt a small breath of relief. He had come. But then the car door opened, and her heart sank. Out stepped Derek, not alone, but with his ex-girlfriend, Vanessa. She was holding onto his arm like they were at a party, not a funeral. Vanessa wore a tight black dress that showed too much for such a sad day, and her makeup looked like it was done for a night out, not to honor someone who had passed away. Cassie stared, confused, hurt, and shocked. Derek didn't look sad. He was smiling. He walked over and said, "Vanessa came to support me." Cassie couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mother was being buried, and her fiancé thought it was okay to bring his ex along, as if he were the one who needed comfort. Her eyes burned with tears, but she held them back. She didn't want to cry in front of them, not now. The pain in her chest felt worse than ever, not just from the loss of her mum, but from this unexpected betrayal. People around the grave looked uncomfortable. A few glanced at Cassie with sympathy. Others whispered quietly to each other. She could feel the shame rising in her, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. Her moment of goodbye had been stolen. It should have been about love, memory, and respect. Instead, it turned into a public heartbreak. Cassie stood still, unable to speak. Derek and Vanessa stayed close, acting like nothing was wrong. Cassie felt like she was the only one who could see how cruel the moment was. In that instant, something shifted inside her. She knew everything was about to change, but for now, she just stood in the cold wind, saying goodbye to her mother and quietly wondering who the man beside her really was. After the funeral, everyone gathered at Cassie's family home. The house felt heavy, full of grief, flowers, and quiet conversations. People hugged Cassie gently, offering food and kind words that barely touched the pain in her heart. She moved through the rooms like a shadow, numb and exhausted. But even through her sadness, one thing kept pulling at her: Derek and Vanessa. They were always near each other, whispering, laughing softly, sitting too close on the couch. Vanessa walked around the house like she belonged there. She helped herself to drinks, chatted with relatives, even tried to comfort Cassie's aunt like she was part of the family. Cassie watched it all with wide, tired eyes, unsure if she was imagining things or if it really was as strange as it felt. That night, Cassie found out Vanessa was staying over. Derek told her casually, like it was no big deal. She didn't want to drive back so late. She'll just crash on the couch. But Cassie knew her house had empty guest rooms, and when she walked past the hallway later, she saw Vanessa slipping into the same room as Derek, her stomach twisted. She didn't say anything. The next morning, Cassie's best friend, Talia, arrived with coffee and a quiet hug. She didn't say much at first, just sat beside Cassie while they watched Derek and Vanessa eating breakfast together in the kitchen, acting like they were on vacation instead of mourning with the family. Talia's eyes narrowed. Cassie tried to brush it off. "I think they're just trying to help," Cassie said softly, though her voice shook. Talia turned to her with a serious look. "Cass, that's not support, that's replacement." Cassie looked down, tears pricking her eyes. She wanted to believe Derek was just confused, that grief was making everything weird. But deep down, she knew Talia was right. Derek hadn't been there for her. He hadn't even looked at her properly since the funeral. Every word from him was shallow. Every touch felt distant. Meanwhile, Vanessa seemed to be stepping into a space that wasn't hers, offering smiles, comfort, and closeness that belonged to Cassie. Talia didn't push her, but her presence was a lifeline. She saw what Cassie couldn't bring herself to admit yet, and when Derek called Vanessa babe, by mistake that afternoon, Cassie saw it too. It was like a crack in the wall she'd tried so hard to keep up. The pain of her mother's death hadn't even settled, and now the person she trusted most was slipping away right in front of her. Cassie said nothing. She smiled when people looked her way. She nodded through conversations, but inside, something had changed. The sadness was still there, but now, so was something colder: doubt, confusion, and a growing sense that she wasn't the one being supported. She was being replaced. A few days after the funeral, the house had quieted down. The flowers were starting to wilt. The casserole dishes had been returned. People had gone back to their lives, but Cassie couldn't. She stayed in the stillness, alone with her thoughts, trying to make sense of everything. Derek was still around, but distant. He moved through the house like a guest, answering questions with short replies, checking his phone constantly, always stepping outside to take calls. One evening, while looking for a charger in Derek's bag, Cassie found his old iPad. She hadn't seen it in months and assumed he'd stopped using it. Curious, and feeling that odd gut pull of suspicion, she turned it on. To her surprise, it was still connected to his account. Messages began loading slowly, a long thread of them. Her hands trembled as she opened the chat with Vanessa. What she read made her heart freeze. There were flirty texts, jokes, little compliments, and late-night check-ins. Can't sleep without hearing your voice. Remember that weekend in the cabin? There were secret meetups, plans made while Cassie thought Derek was working late, photos sent back and forth, Vanessa in a towel, Derek sending selfies in her kitchen, and then the words that broke Cassie's already fragile heart. Cassie's been too emotional since the miscarriage. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. With you, it's just easy. Cassie couldn't breathe. Her eyes blurred as more messages appeared, time-stamped and cold. She scrolled to the morning of her mother's funeral and read Derek's message to Vanessa. Be strong for me today. You're all I've got. Not Cassie, the woman who had just lost her mother. Not the woman he was engaged to, but Vanessa, his ex. The one now living in her home, eating at her table, sleeping in the guest room that had somehow stopped being a guest room. Cassie sat there in silence, the iPad glowing in her lap. Her chest felt tight. Her body didn't move, but her mind was racing. Everything that hadn't made sense suddenly did. The looks, the closeness, the way Derek defended Vanessa, even when it hurt Cassie. He had never stopped loving her. Maybe he had never even tried. She put the iPad down slowly, her hands cold and shaking. Part of her wanted to scream, to throw it across the room. But another part, the quieter, steadier part, was waking up. That part didn't cry. It didn't panic. It remembered. It remembered the lies, the miscarriage, the funeral, the way he smiled with Vanessa while Cassie stood at her mother's grave. And now, the truth was right in front of her, plain as day. Cassie knew she would never look at Derek the same way again. And though she didn't know exactly what she would do yet, one thing was certain. This wasn't over. Cassie waited until the house was quiet. Derek was in the kitchen, pouring himself a drink like it was any normal evening. She stood in the doorway, holding the iPad in her hand. Her heart wasn't racing anymore. The hurt was still there, but it had hardened into something sharper. She walked over and placed the iPad on the table in front of him. He looked at it, confused at first. Then the screen lit up. Vanessa's name at the top, messages wide open. Cassie didn't speak. She didn't have to. Derek stared at the screen, then back at her. Cass, it's not what you think. She tilted her head slightly, still silent. He gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. Those messages, it was just emotional support. We were both in a weird place. You were distant after the miscarriage. And now with your mom, I didn't want to upset you more. Cassie's eyes stayed on him. Her face didn't move. She's just someone I can talk to, he continued, his voice softer now, trying to sound reasonable. It's not like I cheated. We've been going through a lot. You've been grieving in your own way. She blinked slowly once. He went on. You've been shutting me out. You cry all the time. I didn't know how to help. I needed someone who wasn't falling apart. That was it. The final blow. Cassie felt something break, but it wasn't her. It was the last thread holding on to the man she thought he was. He was standing there, explaining how her pain had been too inconvenient, how her grief had made him seek comfort in the arms of his ex, and somehow she was supposed to understand. Still, she said nothing. She just watched him twist the truth, watched him try to shape her heartbreak into an excuse for his betrayal. He tried to turn her mother's death into a reason he had turned to someone else. Cassie didn't cry. She didn't argue. She let him speak, let him squirm in the silence, and in that moment, she realized something. She wasn't looking at the man she loved anymore. She was looking at a stranger wearing his face. Cassie didn't scream. She didn't throw anything or demand answers. After the confrontation, she simply nodded and walked away. Derek seemed relieved, like he thought he'd talked her down. He told her he was glad they could be mature about it, that they could work through this. Cassie smiled faintly and agreed. She even apologized, said maybe she had been too emotional, that maybe she had been hard to live with. Derek accepted the apology without hesitation, like he'd been waiting to hear it. That's when she knew she'd made the right choice. She wasn't leaving, not yet. The next day, Cassie started collecting things. Quietly, carefully. She took screenshots of messages, backed up photos, and saved everything to a hidden folder on her computer. She went through old emails, calendar invites, receipts. Whenever Derek left his phone around, she checked his recent apps and browser history. She noticed a pattern: locations, names of hotels, restaurants he claimed were work meetings. Then she remembered their devices were still linked through a family sharing app. He must have forgotten. Through that, she could see everywhere he went. When he said he was meeting his boss, he was actually at a boutique hotel 2 towns over. When he said he was out getting groceries, dinner with Vanessa, Cassie didn't cry anymore. She didn't ask questions or bring up what she knew. Instead, she acted like she was healing, like she wanted to fix things. She started making dinner again, laughing at his jokes. She told him she missed how things used to be. She even bought him a gift: new luggage and a bottle of cologne he had once said he liked in passing. "You deserve something nice," she said sweetly, and he kissed her like nothing had happened. But behind every kind word, Cassie was planning. She met with a lawyer, quietly, while Derek was away for one of his work retreats. She showed the messages, the evidence, the inheritance her mother had left her, and the joint accounts that Derek had access to. The lawyer nodded, serious. They would be ready when the time came. Cassie's heart still ached, but the ache had changed. It wasn't just grief now. It was purpose, focus. She was no longer the woman standing helplessly at a gravesite, watching her world fall apart. She was rebuilding something quiet, steady, and sharp. And Derek had no idea. He thought she was coming back to him. He thought she had forgiven him. But Cassie wasn't forgiving anything. She was waiting, watching, preparing. Cassie had been keeping track of everything, quietly, carefully. While Derek went on pretending everything was fine, she kept digging. One afternoon, while going through paperwork for her lawyer, she opened their joint credit card statements. She hadn't paid much attention to them before. She trusted him, but now, trust was gone, and what she found only confirmed it. The charges were all there, in black and white. Expensive restaurants in cities he claimed he never visited, hotel bookings under his name, matching the same dates and locations she'd seen on the shared device tracker, spa treatments, gifts from luxury stores she'd never received. Cassie's hands stayed steady as she highlighted everyone. Then she saw something that made her breath catch. A charge from a high-end jewelry store, just days after her mom passed. She remembered that place. Her mother had taken her there once, years ago. Derek knew it too. She checked the store's name online, found the receipt in the downloaded statement. It was for a gold bracelet, an antique design, almost identical to one her mother used to wear. Vanessa had it on her wrist last week. Cassie stared at the screen for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't feel rage. She felt clarity, cold and sharp. Her mother had left her an inheritance, meant to give her a future, a safety net, maybe a new start. Derek had dipped into that money to spoil the woman he was cheating with. And worse, he had taken something sacred, something symbolic, and handed it to Vanessa like it meant nothing. There were no more doubts now, no more wondering if she was overreacting or misunderstanding. Everything was out in the open, even if Derek still thought he was safe. Cassie smiled just slightly, not out of happiness, but understanding. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about justice. Her pain had already happened. What came next wouldn't be about emotion. It would be about timing, planning, and execution. Cassie took a deep breath, closed the laptop, and stood up. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft of her love, her trust, and her future. But he hadn't taken everything. Not yet. Cassie waited for the right moment. She'd been planning for weeks, carefully setting each piece in place. By now, Derek thought they were rebuilding. He believed her soft smiles and quiet apologies. He believed her when she said she wanted to try therapy. He even seemed proud of her for suggesting it, like he thought she was finally seeing things clearly. "Couples counseling could really help us," she had said, eyes wide, voice calm. "Maybe we both made mistakes." Derek agreed easily, smug and confident. He wanted to be seen as the guy who tried, the guy who owned his flaws. He didn't realize Cassie already had everything she needed: the messages, the location logs, the financial records. Now she just wanted his words, in his voice. They went to a small therapist's office across town, one Cassie had picked on purpose. Neutral, quiet, professional. The kind of place where people said too much, thinking it made them brave. During the session, Derek leaned into the role. He sighed at all the right moments, looked down when he talked about the pressure. He spoke like a man who wanted forgiveness, but not accountability. "I was lost," he said softly. "I didn't know how to help Cassie after the miscarriage. Then her mum died, and she completely shut down. I felt invisible. Vanessa was just there. She reminded me of who I was." Cassie sat still beside him. She nodded occasionally, hands folded in her lap. Inside, her phone was recording everything from her purse. "I know it was wrong," Derek continued, "but I didn't sleep with her. Not right away. It was emotional. I needed connection. Cassie just wasn't available." The therapist said something about rebuilding trust. Derek nodded along, said things like, "We all have our breaking points," and "I want to do better." Cassie never looked at him directly. She didn't need to. That night, back at the house, Derek seemed satisfied. He poured wine and suggested watching a movie. Cassie smiled, excused herself, and went upstairs. She didn't watch the movie. Instead, she organized every file: screenshots, emails, hotel confirmations, credit card statements, and now the therapy recording. She named the folder neatly and backed it up in multiple places. Then she began drafting her emails, one to Derek's boss, another to HR. She attached proof of the affair. Vanessa was technically a contractor. Workplace rules applied. She added one more message to their family group chat. The final drop would go there too. Downstairs, Derek laughed at something on TV, thinking he'd won. Cassie sat in bed, typing quietly. By morning, everything would begin to fall. Derek thought he was heading off for a romantic weekend. He packed the new cologne Cassie had bought him and the sleek luggage she gave him with a grin. "Enjoy yourself," she had whispered, kissing him goodbye at the door. Vanessa waited in the car. Cassie waved from the porch as they pulled away. She didn't watch them disappear. She went back inside and locked the door. Then she got to work. First, she logged into the joint bank account. She had already opened a new one in her name weeks ago. With a few clicks, she transferred every dollar of her inheritance, the money her mother had left her that Derek had used, like it was his own. The screen blinked. Funds cleared. Zero balance. Next came the locks. A locksmith had been scheduled in advance. He arrived exactly on time, changed every keyhole, and left with a friendly nod. By noon, Derek no longer had a way into the house. Cassie took a deep breath. The house was quiet, and it finally felt like hers again. Then came the final step. She opened her laptop and sent out 3 messages. The first was to the group chat with both families: parents, siblings, close friends. Her message was brief and cold. "I thought you should see what's been going on. I'm done protecting him." She attached the folder, screenshots, receipts, location data, and an audio clip from therapy where Derek confessed everything. No comments, no drama, just facts. The second email was sent to Derek's company. She addressed it to HR, copying 2 senior managers. She attached evidence of the inappropriate relationship between Derek and Vanessa, who had been working with the company as a freelance consultant. There were clear conflicts of interest and clear policy violations. The third email went to her lawyer. Everything was in place. By the time Derek and Vanessa returned Sunday night, their keys wouldn't work. The account was empty. His inbox was exploding. His reputation, carefully built over years, had started to crumble. Cassie didn't answer his calls. She didn't respond to the panicked texts. She didn't need to. The truth had finally landed, and it hit like a bomb. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. 2 days after Cassie dropped the truth, Derek lost his job. The company moved fast once they saw the evidence. The affair alone was bad enough, but Vanessa being a contractor made it worse. HR confirmed it violated multiple policies. He was walked out of the building the same day. No goodbye party, no second chances. Vanessa stopped answering his calls by the end of the week. Her contract was quietly terminated, and she vanished like smoke. Cassie watched it all from a distance. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply turned off her notifications. Derek spiraled. He sent long texts, voice messages filled with tears and apologies. He left voicemails at all hours of the night. He said he was sorry, said he didn't mean to hurt her, said she was the only real thing in his life. that he was lost without her, that he didn't know who he was anymore. Cassie never replied, not once. She packed what mattered and left the rest. Talia came over the day of the move and helped her load the car. They didn't talk about Derek much. Cassie had already said everything that needed to be said without words. Instead, they talked about the new city, a smaller apartment, a fresh start, somewhere with no memories attached. Cassie didn't cry when she drove away. In the new city, she moved into a modest place on a quiet street. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. No one else had ever lived there with her. No one had walked those halls calling her too emotional. She unpacked slowly, one box at a time. A week later, she visited a local animal shelter and came home with a shy, nervous rescue dog named Max. He followed her everywhere, unsure at first, but slowly learning to trust. Just like her, Cassie started therapy too. Once a week, she sat with someone who listened without judgment. She talked about her mom, the miscarriage, the betrayal, the loss inside losses. She didn't always know what to say, but it helped just to speak. She didn't smile often, not yet, but she slept through the night for the first time in months. No nightmares, no racing thoughts, just quiet. Derek kept trying to reach her for a while, but eventually, even his desperation dried up. She deleted his number. She wasn't healed, not fully, but she was safe, and that was enough for now. The sky was overcast, soft grey clouds hanging low as Cassie walked through the cemetery. It had been a year, 12 long months since the funeral, since her world cracked open and the truth came spilling out. She held a small bundle of white lilies in one hand, her fingers steady as she made her way to the same spot she had once stood, heartbroken and humiliated. Her mother's headstone hadn't changed, but Cassie had. She knelt quietly, placing the flowers down with care. Then she pulled a folded letter from her coat pocket and tucked it under a small flat stone near the base. She didn't read it aloud. The words had already been said in her heart. "I wish you were still here," she whispered, her voice low. "But you were right about him. I just wish I'd listened sooner." There were no tears this time, no shaking hands, just the calm stillness of truth, the kind of peace that comes after a storm. Not because everything is better, but because it's finally over. She sat with her mom for a few more minutes, then stood up. As she walked back toward the car, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost didn't check, but something told her to look. Derek. His name still showed up, even now. One last call. One more attempt to claw his way back into her life. For a second, she just stared at the screen, remembering everything. His lies, his betrayal, the way he smiled at her mother's funeral with Vanessa on his arm. Then she hit block. Simple, quiet, done. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and exhaled, like releasing a weight she didn't realize she'd been holding. There was no anger left in her, no bitterness, just distance. As she got into her car, Max, her rescue dog, poked his head up from the back seat, tail thumping against the cushion. She gave him a small smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes but didn't need to. It was real enough. Cassie drove away from the graveyard slowly, not looking back. Not everyone gets justice. Not everyone gets closure. She got both, and now she had peace. Do you think Cassie did the right thing by walking away from Derek for good? Or should she have given him a second chance after everything they went through? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.